whenever we sharpen a knife in the field, it's going to be a compromise because we can't carry the large bench stones that we would use at home. So what I carry with me is a small stone which is double-sided. On one side is a coarse diamond abrasive and on the other is a fine ceramic side. I also carry with me a few small nails, and I use the nails, I hammer those into the wood or a flat log just to hold the stone steady. Stops it sliding backwards and forwards. And what I do is I place the blade with the edge bevel, that's the last angle of the blade towards the edge, flat on the stone, and I slice the knife backwards and forwards over the stone, always placing the pressure so that it seems as though I'm trying to cut the stone. And this one, the pressure's there, not on the backstroke. But obviously when I do this all together, it's quite fast. Once I've used the coarse side of the stone to just tidy up the edge, remove any nicks that there may be, and to generally keep a nice angle on the bevel there, I turn the stone over to the fine side and polish the edge with this side of the stone in exactly the same way. This gives a much finer edge which will last longer. The secret to sharpening a knife is to sharpen it when you need to, but to sharpen only when you need to. You don't want to wear the knife away unnecessarily. If you're using your knife hard, it might be that you'll have to sharpen the knife once a day or maybe even more. If you're not using a knife very often, then obviously it can be on a much more sporadic basis, once a week, once a month even. When I think it's done, I just test it on a piece of wood to see if it'll feather a stick of wood. That's a good test for an edge, and you can see there any problems that exist. It's very important when you use a knife that the knife is sharp. A blunt knife is a dangerous tool because you have to place more pressure behind the edge. It's terribly important to keep your knife sharp. It's much safer and it makes jobs easier. In fact, a knife becomes a joy to use and you can create all sorts of things of beauty with one. At home or in the expedition base camp, we can keep our knife in tip-top order using full-grown bench stones like these ones. And this is how we do it. These are Japanese water stones, and the first job is to soak them in water. They only need to soak for about 5 or 10 minutes just to saturate them. And I'm using 3 different grits here. The coarsest stone is an 800, the medium is a 1200, and the fine stone is this light coloured one, which is 6000. You can manage without this, but it is a very good idea to have one. And this is a clamp to hold the stones with rubber feet, so you can put it on a flat surface and the stone won't slide around. I'm starting here with the 800 stone, the coarsest one, and I'm making sure I keep the stone wet. If it goes dry, it'll cease to work efficiently. You place your knife flat on the stone and then tilt it until the bevel, the edge bevel, is flat on top of the stone. And now try to slice across the top of the stone, keeping that bevel flat. And I normally do this for about 8 strokes. Now I've done 8 strokes in this direction. Now I must turn the blade over and repeat coming back the other way. Lay the blade flat, tilt it till the edge bevel is flat, and now slice back towards yourself like this. Having done 8 strokes this way and 8 this way, I'll now do 8 alternating the direction. I do this to make sure I keep the edge true to the centre of the blade, keeping everything nice and even. The thing I'm going to do now is just give this area which is closest to the handle some special attention, because this is the part of the blade we use most for carving. What I do now is repeat the whole process with the medium grit, the 1200. When the edge is absolutely flat and there are no light spots reflecting from the edge, you can move on to the next stone, which is the finest grit. The last stone is going to really polish the blade and gives a very fine edge, and a fine edge lasts longer than a coarse edge. But the way we use this stone is slightly different. We have to create a slurry on the surface, and most of these stones are supplied with this little stone, which has a wonderful name. They call it the Nugura stone. And the way you use this is to create a slurry on top of the stone, and it's the slurry which is abrasive and actually polishes the blade. It may seem like a lot of effort, but you don't do this very often. What you're doing here is you're keeping your knife in absolutely the best condition. Beautifully sharp, beautifully polished edge, and it's very satisfying actually. That black streak, that is the metal coming off of the blade. Basically you use this stone in exactly the same way as the previous ones. 8 strokes in one direction, 8 in the other, and then 8 alternating. The slurry from the stone can also be used to polish up the face of the blade. Just keep your fingers well away from the edge, obviously. This is a carbon steel blade. Carbon steel blade takes a beautiful edge, but it will stain and rust if allowed to, and it responds to nature. You can see this purple stain from the tannin in wood, and it's nice when you sharpen the knife like this just to polish that away. And this slurry is all you need just to do that. It doesn't take much work at all, it's dead easy. And there we go. You can see the kind of mirror edge that that stone puts on the edge. In theory, if you've done the sharpening on the stones properly, you could avoid this next stage, but I always like to put it in just to make sure the knife is perfect. What I'm going to do is I'm going to strop the edge. And what that does is it removes any tiny, almost molecular thin pieces of metal which may be wobbling on the edge of the blade. And to do that, I'm going to use the inside of my belt, and I'm going to drag the knife so that the edge coming the other way. It's not trying to cut the belt, it's going in the opposite direction. And I give it 50 strokes. I could leave the sharpening with the stropping as the last process, but whenever there's a vehicle available with the edge of a window like this, there's one last little tip that gives this edge, which is already like a razor, but it gives it a little bit more bite, which means that carving is safer. And that's just to use the edge of the window like a steel. And I just place the edge on there, tilt it, and very lightly, not even with the weight of the blade, run it across about 10 times. Now that is perfect. I can test it on the hairs of my arm. But maybe a better way to show you is with a piece of paper. Whenever I travel in wilderness, I always have my knife to hand, because with this tool I can make life possible. One of the things I've always taught is your knife is your life. With this I can make fire, shelter, find food, do all of the things I need with ease and simplicity. Without a cutting tool, life becomes very difficult. But there are a few things we need to know regarding safety. When I'm not using my knife, it stays safely in its sheath. That's the only place it should be when it's not in use. And I always know where my knife is. If I'm not carrying it on my person, I know where I've got it stored so that it can't fall into the hands of the idle-minded, or worse still, be lost. When I take the knife from the sheath, I do so with great care. Obviously it's a very sharp blade. And the first thing is to hold the sheath in such a way that I don't wrap my fingers around where the edge could cut through the leather by accident. And when I remove the blade, I do it in two stages. Firstly, I loosen the knife from the sheath, and secondly, I remove it slowly and with care. If I have to pass the knife to anybody else, which is rare because we don't very often lend a knife, it's the quickest way to lose a friend, is to lend them a knife and have the knife come back looking like the edge of a saw. But if I do have to pass my knife to somebody, I do so like this. I hold the knife with a forehand grip and then tilt it like so, so that the handle is towards them and the edge is up and away from me. That is the only safe way to pass the knife to somebody. The most important grip of all is the forehand grip, used like this. It's a very strong grip and we use this for power cuts. The second grip is the backhand or reverse grip, where the blade is held with the edge towards us. We use this very rarely. It's used mainly for cutting string, where we want to ensure that the danger, the edge, is towards us because we are the operator, we're the person holding the blade and have the greatest control. The next most important grip is the chest lever grip, with the edge pointing towards the knuckle of our hand and our thumb on the flat of the blade in support. This is a very useful and very powerful grip which is used in a unique way. We take the blade across our chest so that the back of the blade is towards our chest, edge forwards. And now we can cut with great force but lots of control. A good way to show you how to use the knife is to make something that we have to do on a regular basis. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make two tent pegs. We often have to make pegs. Maybe we arrive at a campsite and the ground is soft, too soft for the small pegs that came with our tent, or maybe we're just carrying a tarp and we decide that we want to peg to the ground. Either way, this is how we can go about it. I'm going to show you how to put a point on the stick with just a few easy cuts. To make the points, I'm using the forehand grip, which gives a lot of power. I can put my whole body behind the cut. I put a point on both ends of the stick, and what I'll do now is I'll use my knife to give me a measurement so I can find out roughly where the middle is. And now I'm going to cut through the middle of the stick to give a chamfered end that can be driven with an axe. The chest lever grip gives tremendous control combined with a lot of power, and because it's close to your eyes you can see very clearly what you're achieving. It's also a very safe grip because the knife doesn't fly all over the place. And now we can just snap that there and just trim off the top. There we go, 2 pegs ready to be driven into the ground. This is a temporary tent peg, but you can easily turn this into a permanent tent peg with a little bit more carving and the use of the fire. I'm just shaving the point of the blade to a more of a pencil shape, more bullet shaped end, which is more durable than the temporary peg. A bit neater. I'll remove some of the bark as well. Pegs like this are excellent. When they're dry, they're very light, they're strong, they do the job beautifully. And what's really nice is they're biodegradable, so should you forget one, and let's face it, people forget tent pegs the whole time, they just decay and go back to nature. I don't want the point though to be too fine, so I'm going to make that a little bit more blunt so that it's stronger for driving into the ground. Like that. I've put the tips of the pegs into the ashes where there's not much oxygen, but there's a lot of heat, and I just want to heat them until they're a lot drier and the wood is just on the edge of scorching, when it'll be a lot harder. It's almost like tempering metal. Certainly it hardens the wood, makes them more durable. It takes a lot of experience to judge exactly when they are hardened enough. When you first start out, you can heat them until the wood is just turning brown and consider that done. But here's one tip. As the moisture is driven from them, the sound will change. At this point of the stick, the lower end, they're still wet. At the other tip, they're drying. Should sound harder. Certainly they physically are feeling a lot tougher. stinging nettles have been used for cordage just about wherever they grow. Certainly it's something our ancestors used, and they're full of very long fibres. With practice and a little bit of confidence, you can quite easily clean a stinging nettle without getting stung just with your bare hands. It's the old saying of to grasp a nettle, I think, is to really be a little bit firm with it, and you just clean them off like that. But if you have a lot of nettles to do, it's certainly well worth protecting your hands, and if you didn't have gloves with you, you can cover your hands in mud or clay, and that gives a very surprisingly good protection from the stings. That's how I do it barehanded, and I don't get stung at all by that process. But when you have a lot to do, it is a good idea to wear gloves, just because it speeds the whole process up. Fibres I'm after are on the outside of the nettle, and to get at those, the first thing to do is to flatten the nettle. These red nettles here I gathered from the open. They're quite different to the ones you saw me pick in the woods, which were lighter coloured green. These red nettles like this one are better for fibres, they give stronger fibres. Sometimes you need something to bear down on. Just to once you flatten the nettle, what I do is I split it open and lay it flat. I'm splitting it. Like that. Now I bend it in the middle so that the pith, which is on the inside, breaks upwards and away from the fibres. Like that. And lay that over my index finger, place my thumb on top, and then pull down. So now you can see the pith coming away from the fibres, and we go both ways. These are the fibres we're after. They're very strong, but they need to be dried before we can make those into cordage. Although for many purposes they could be used just as they were. And this is the way that we use the fibres in the programme on Aboriginal Britain to attach the arrowhead. A fibre just as it is like that makes an extremely useful binding. Good and strong. Today perhaps somebody gardening, looking for something to tie up some onions or tie up a plant in the garden and not having some string to hand, could look in the nettle patch and use a skill from our past. You don't have to make string, you could just put a few fibres together like that, just twist them and use that as an impromptu tie. Completely biodegradable and will grow back. If I was going to make string from these, I would dry these fibres before I made the string, because they're going to shrink down an awful lot as they dry. In fact, when these are dry, it'll look just like a few hairs in my hand, because they really do shrink down thin. You need a lot of nettles to make cord. But anyway, just to show you how, we take a couple of fibres and we twist them together to make the fibre nice and round. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bend it in half, take the midpoint, and I'm going to roll on my thigh both of these strands in the same direction at the same time, like this. And at the end of the roll I clamp them against my thigh so they won't unravel, and then I let go on the left, and you see it start to twist up into cord. And what we do is we just encourage that, give it a little extra twist, like so, and then you move your fingers up to where the strands are parted, pinch it there, and repeat the process. And you can see how we're starting to get string. Now obviously eventually we're going to get to an end, because We always reach an end at some point, but in fact long before that, because these fibres taper, one of these strands will start to become thinner than its partner, and if we don't add in a new fibre at that point, the thin one will simply wrap around the thick one and we lose all the strength. So what we do is I look now for a strand of the right sort of thickness, and you can see here how they taper, and we lay that alongside the strand which is thinning the most and twist in the new fibre, and we carry on as before. And of course we could make as long a piece of cord as we need or we like, or that we have patience to make. Unfortunately, because of the programmes only being 60 minutes long, there are inevitably things that happen that don't always make it into the programmes. And I think the cheetah kill in Africa was a classic case in point.
There's one of the animals was broken away. It's running. Oh, animal's running up front. It's chasing. It's running at the gazelles. It's picked up a fawn. It must have seen a fawn. Just follow the lead animal. Quick, have a look. It's grabbed. It's killed.
That is incredible. The speed at which they made that kill. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't see the lead animal. It just, went straight out of my vision.
Yeah.
It all happened so quickly, we missed the moment when the cheetah actually grabbed the Thompson's gazelle. When we actually got down to the kill site, the cheetahs were disturbed by the presence of the camera vehicles and left, which was very unusual. And we believe their behaviour indicates that those particular cheetahs have perhaps been hunted illegally by people from vehicles.
Okay, they're shy now. They're heading for cover. They're moving towards the trees. Don't like being caught out in the open. They're not sure about us at all. Very, very shy.
Having left the kill, nature took over, and it was an amazing thing to see. From maybe 20,000 feet in the air, vultures spotted the kill site and the movement, the disturbance there on the ground, and came down. It was quite a thing to see, like free-fall parachutists landing on the site. They come in with this incredible wingspan and they start to squabble over the kill and start to take their pickings. They don't hang around, do they? Not happy. But almost as soon as they'd arrived, a young hyena, had spotted them flying down onto the ground and swooping down.
Hyena already coming in. It's to the right of the bunch. To the right of the bunch. Coming in.
Got it. Yeah.
Got it. It's going to come left now.
Oh, he just picks the whole thing up. He's a strong animal. Look at that.
And that just shows you the eyesight of a hyena. I mean, to see these birds coming in, and it could have been from, easy a couple of miles away.
Yeah. We followed that young hyena. It was very interesting to see what he did, and he took the carcass over to a waterhole, took it into the waterhole, which would hide the scent from the carcass, and began to eat.
Good thing about having taken this kill into the water is that there are no pestering from vultures. Vultures won't actually go into the...
Another hyena coming in.
Another one?
Yep. And then another hyena shows up, an adult hyena, female hyena. There you can see the other hyena now, he's where the vultures are. And he's just trying to pick up now the scent trail. Yeah, sniffing the ground. Look. With this incredible sense of smell, she picks up the trail and follows it like a bloodhound, exactly where the young hyena had dragged the Thompson's gazelle. Absolutely foot perfect, follows this blood trail, this tiny trail of spoor that's indistinguishable to the eye, but to the sensitive sense of smell of the hyena was very obvious. Follows it all the way over to the waterhole. The nose is leading it.
Yeah.
That's amazing, Warren. It's quite clear she knows the game now, doesn't she?
Look, she's seen it now. She's seen the youngster. She's running in.
But once she saw the water hole, she seemed to know what was happening. Oh, look at this. Oh, yeah, back off. Yeah, clear off. You've had yours. And she just says, basically, hey, move on. This is mine now. And takes what was remaining of the carcass and enjoyed it. It was a fantastic thing to witness, to be able to follow that whole scene and to see it unfold just feet away from our vehicle was something I shan't ever forget. It really shows you the power of the savannah and how the ecosystem there really works. The cheetahs, meanwhile, went back to a different waterhole where there was shade and cover and sat down there under some shade watching and looking for another opportunity. And you could see them and detect them because the zebras around that waterhole were watching them very intently and just keeping a careful eye on them. It's not an easy life for cheetahs. They're quite a light animal, a real specialist hunter, and they're very easily pushed off the kill by other animals, other predators and scavengers. So it was a rather sad thing to see, but still a fascinating thing to witness.